This is Brother Augustine here. Hello, one and all. It's been a long time since we did a live stream, especially a solo live stream. So we got to start with the classic intro. Welcome to the Brother Augustine channel, where my guests and I seek to edify, educate, and entertain the world from an Orthodox Christian perspective. Can you guys hear me? Is always the first and most important question. Man, a lot of familiar names here today. It's been a long time, guys. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you are all making good use of this Apostles' Fast, using it as a time of turning away from things that you normally seek after for pleasure and comfort. Can be food, can be video games, movies, music with lyrics, secular music as a whole, whatever it is that you and your spiritual father have decided would be best for your spiritual growth. If you deprive yourself of this opportunity to fast, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Obviously, none of us do it perfectly or anything close to perfectly, but still, the church gives us these tools for a reason. It's to help us. The church does not need us to fast. We need to fast, right? Young Penitent is here. Pano, Orthodox Boomer, Grandma, Allheart, Eric Maldonado, Rat Splatigan. Look at all these classic names. Good to see everybody again. As you can tell, my voice is a little bit scratchy. Feeling a little bit under the weather. For the record, these are not 80s glasses. They are blue blocker clip-ons that just so happen to go perfectly over the frames that I have. So it might look like they're their own pair. But I'm doing this to protect my eyes from the screen. Today, we are talking about a book that I've been working on for almost 3 years, mostly quietly, mostly. My first public mention of this project was on Robin Riley's channel. You guys remember that interview? That was about 2 years ago, I think. 1.5 to 2 years ago. I mentioned I was working on a book to baptize Julius Evola and would let her know and the rest of the world know if and when I ever finish the project. And then on my Rockfin channel, rockfin.com/Brother Augustine, I read the introduction, or at least the draft of the introduction of this project to see if there was interest, to see if it was something worth pursuing as either a video series or something written. You'll have to forgive my voice. It's already dead because I worked today, and that involves a lot of talking. A lot of talking, explaining, persuading, selling, all kinds of stuff. What am I doing for hair growth? Well, it's an ancient secret by which one simply does not shave the head. And then somehow, this is what you get 6 months later, 8 months later. Anyway, after rewriting my book from the ground up, and I really do mean that, from the ground up, it has gone through a number of drafts. It's completely changed in some ways. I was going to publish it today because today is the feast of my patron saint, St. Augustine of Hippo, one of the most well-known converts from paganism in the history of Christianity. However, due to the way Amazon publishes books, I ended up publishing it on Tuesday. And now, for the world to enjoy, Fascism viewed from the cross. This isn't on your versions of it. It says not for resale. This is the proof copy Amazon sends you for you to approve, for you to look over it, make sure the cover looks good, the margins are readable, the book is readable, there's nothing weird going on with the pages. They send you this not for resale version. As you can see, it's by far my biggest book, more than twice as long as my next longest book on the Masons and their lies, published back in 2018. As hard as that one was to write in terms of research, this was just orders of magnitude more involved, more thorough. I read so many books. You can see some of them maybe. Does my camera tilt? A little bit. Not all those books were research, but everything on my desk was part of the research, and there was a whole lot more than that. Oh, now we're doing this. And now we're doing that. There we go. Oh, thank you for the super chat. Frankie, he says, bro, I caught you. It was great to see you a few weeks ago at church. I'll definitely be buying the book. God bless, brother. Nice to see you again, Frankie. Glad to see you made it safely to your destination. Some of you may be wondering, because I don't know if it's been seen in any of my videos. That's my guitar case, one of my guitar cases. There's another one under it. Actually, there's two more under it. If you're wondering what that sticker is, it's an HVAC skull and crossbones. Instead of the crossbones, it's a manifold gauge and a wrench, just in case some of you are curious what was going on there. This, of course, the Byzantine eagle. Sometimes people think it's a Freemason symbol because the Freemasons co-opted the double-headed eagle. Actually, it's a symbol that's much older than either Masonry or I think even Christianity. It's a very, very old symbol that's been used by many cultures for many reasons. The inside of the book. Well, as you may imagine, it has words. I'm not sure what you were expecting, Atticus, but there's no pictures. I can show you the table of contents, which I posted to Telegram and Twitter as well. Let's see, can we get a focus on that? And so I'm going to go through a little bit about what this book is, how it's organized, and of course, you guys are welcome to ask questions. And assuming you're not trying to Fed post and get my channel taken down, I will probably answer them. We have Pano here acting as moderator just in case things get a little out of hand. This is a very spicy topic, I know. Yeah, I basically just decided to take a break from controversy and write something that everyone would agree on, right? I'm sure there will be no debates at all. Everyone's going to read this and go, yeah, I didn't see anything in there that made me think. No, I'm just joking. I know this is a spicy topic. There's a lot of heavy stuff in here. Like the book description says on Amazon, it is not for the faint-hearted. That's not just marketing. It's true. I think people will be challenged by every chapter of this book. Challenged in a way that makes you look at yourself, your beliefs, our church, and depending on where you're starting from, because this book was written for a couple specific purposes, my hope is it will bring people more in line with Orthodoxy and the royal path. Basically, the things that I write are the fruits of my own experience and research. I tend to write about things I know, things that I've been through and then looked back on with a different perspective, like Masonry or like this kind of ardent, super right-wing nationalism, you could say. And I know even those words are going to get some people correcting me or telling me, oh, well, what's the definition? I'm just using these words the way they're generally used. Because the truth is we can go too far in any direction, right? There are temptations from the left and there are temptations from the right. And I think it's important to stick to that royal path. And the difficulty, I think, a lot of times is what is that royal path, right? Father Turbo Qualls talks about this all the time, the royal path. But is there any instruction for people at a certain stage of their life? right? There's different blogs and Orthodox websites that talk to certain audiences, people at a certain stage with certain beliefs, understandings, attitudes, and opinions. But for people that are really deep into this kind of fascism or nationalism, whatever you want to call it, there's nothing Orthodox addressing people in that place in their lives with respect and with grace and with empathy and with understanding. Even many Orthodox Christians, if you say you believe in certain things, they will assume that you're evil, right? You're evil, you're a bad person. Well, first of all, that's not helpful for anybody. Nobody, I think most people are not doing what they do, believing what they believe because they're a bad person. I don't think anyone conceives of themselves as a bad person, except in the sense that we say we're the chief of all sinners, right? Thank you, Orthodox Boomer Grandma, for the super chat. Love you, brother. Blessed Names Day. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And so part of my motivation for writing this was not only to correct errors in my own thinking and my own path, because I definitely went too far in the wrong direction, kind of as an overreaction to where I had been earlier, as well as, a reaction to what's happening in the world around us. There's a line I use in this book, which is available on Amazon for those of you asking. Yes, it is currently available on paperback and Kindle. There's a line I use in here that says, I'm paraphrasing myself, that a lot of young men in particular, they look at the state of our country, or what remains of it, I should say, and they start looking through history. They start looking for solutions. Okay, has anyone been in this position before? If so, how did they solve it? Were they able to solve it? What mistakes did they make in solving it, or did they try to solve it and failed? And there's a sense in which, at least speaking from my own experience, maybe you guys can empathize with this, please let me know, where you, at least for me, I eventually settled on this idea that, you know what, even if the fascists weren't always very nice, at least they didn't tolerate drag queen story hour, right? And so you look through history for solutions, and there's not a whole lot to land on that isn't very extreme. Hey, Rich Oscar, how's it going? I have sent you several messages you have not responded to, and I was just worrying today that you might not be okay. So I'm glad to see you here. I'm glad you're doing all right. Maybe you just don't go on Telegram anymore. I don't know. But good to see you, Rich. Everybody, Rich is the editor of Gab News, which has published several articles I wrote. In fact, one of the chapters in this book, called Orthodoxy and the Jews' Imperial Laws, was once published as a Gab News article in more or less the same article form, more or less all the same sentences, that at the time was called Royal Saints and Roman Jews. So if any of you guys read that article, Royal Saints and Roman Jews, then one of the chapters in Fascism Viewed from the Cross will be familiar to you. And so part of the reason I wrote this, like I'm saying, is because it's very hard to find solutions to the problems in the way that a lot of young, zealous, healthy, energetic, vigorous men want to. And then the solutions you find in history are not always aligned with our faith. And in some ways, sometimes they are. And in some ways, sometimes they're not. And part of the problem that I address this in the book as well, is that fascism, the word doesn't really mean anything. If you want to be really strict, it would probably refer to Mussolini's National Fascist Party in Italy. Paul Gottfried, and I quote him in my book as well, he wrote a book called Fascism, The Career of a Concept, where he explains that fascism has become kind of this catch-all buzzword for liberals to use whenever they don't like something. But it doesn't have any positive meaning or definition the way it's typically used. So part of the problem is you can't just speak about fascism. That doesn't mean anything. You have to speak about individual movements in individual countries in specific times and places and deconstruct them into their constituent parts and look at those. You can't really just say fascism is this or fascism isn't that, right? Because different people had different expressions of it. Some fascists were monarchists, right? Like Corneliu Cadrianu. Some, like Mussolini, believed monarchy was good when it was useful, but if it ceased to be useful, then it would cease to be good, and the government should change to be something else that would better serve the Italian people. So even what the government should look like was not consistent across these nationalist movements. And so what this book does, it is separated into two parts. The first part is called Orthodoxy. And in the section called Orthodoxy, what I go through here, if you saw from the table of contents, is the traditional Orthodox view of the church, the state, and the Jews. And one thing I really harp on in this book is sticking with the saints and the councils and the canons. If we stick to authoritative Orthodox sources, not just opinions of Father so-and-so or whatever, if we stick to authoritative conciliar sources, the thesis of this book, in a sense, is that we can then build a standard on these topics, the views of Christianity or the church, views of the state, and views of the Jews, against which to compare political movements in those three categories. And that's what this book is. It's not making suggestions for what we got to do to beat the liberals or anything like that. It's not a blueprint for political power. It's just a historical survey of this is what the saints were saying about the church, the state, and the Jews to the best of my knowledge and my research. This is what Mussolini said on these three topics. This is what Hitler said on these three topics. This is what Cadrianu said on these three topics. And then going through every single one of those aspects, comparing it to the Orthodox standard. That is what this book is. Jim O'Shea asks, not sure if this is true, but I read somewhere. Oh, this should be good. Read somewhere that before Michael Witkoff converted to Orthodox Christianity, he apparently was an occultist, a Mason, and a high-ranking priest of the dark arts. You got 2 out of 3. I don't think I ever described myself as a priest of the dark arts of any rank, low or high. But yes, I was an occultist and I was a Freemason. When I left Freemasonry to become a Christian, I wrote a book called On the Masons and Their Lies that I published back in May of 2018. And I should also mention that all of my books are free for all clergy, all Orthodox clergy. And part of the reason I wrote On the Masons and Their Lies was to be a handbook for Orthodox clergy who had Masons among their flock, and the priest or deacon didn't really understand how to articulate why Masonry was wrong. They knew it was wrong. The guy shouldn't be in it, but couldn't really go through and articulate why. So I wrote that partially as a handbook for priests at the request of a priest who read an earlier version of the book and then asked me if I could kind of update it in that direction. This book, I think, is going to be really helpful for clergy as well. At least I hope and pray so, because I think a lot of guys enter Orthodoxy, as Father Turbo has described, and as other priests will tell you if you ask them, because they see it correctly as a bastion of traditionalism, conservative moral values and social values, cultural values, as a bulwark against the insanity of the country we live in right now. And a lot of those young men are a little too far in a certain direction when they first get started, and that's fine. That's okay. Everyone starts where they're at. God loves us all and wants to heal us all. So if someone tells you they believe in one thing or another thing, and you tell them they're evil, they're a bad person, well, first of all, you might push them out of the church, and also you're not engaging with them in anything approaching a pastoral manner or Christian manner. I'm not accusing any clergy of doing this. I'm saying all people. You know, if this is how we treat people of certain political persuasions, you don't have to like the person, you don't have to agree with the person, but there's a way we're called to treat other people who are pursuing Christ, pursuing truth, right? And so I think that I would love for this to be a book clergy can give to young men entering the church with a lot, like I said, of that vigor and zeal. They have that, what I think it is a combination of a feeling of powerlessness and a desire for justice. I think that's really the formula that leads someone down certain paths. And I know that was true for me. And I know that's true for a lot of my friends as well, people that I've spoken to. I really hope clergy can give this book to parishioners and that it will really be illuminating for them. So that was another reason I wrote it. Yet another reason that I wrote this was because when I was in my political awakening stage, let's say, my political red pilling stage, I read most of Julius Evola's books. And it really changed the way I thought in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, Evola was a very dyed-in-the-wool pagan and occultist, not like a LARPing pagan, like, you know, the American white women who say they're Buddhists. What they really mean is they like to smoke weed and fornicate a lot. I mean, Evola was actually a dedicated practitioner of pagan religion. And that tainted everything that he did and wrote, even though he had very piercing insight in certain political dynamics. So when I read Evola, and I was it really expanded my mind in certain ways. He has an essay called Orientations. It was either in A Traditionalist Confronts Fascism or Fascism Viewed from the Right, which is what this book is a Christian update on, I'm hoping. An essay called Orientations that really expanded my mind in terms of politics and different ways that things could even be conceived of. But I wanted to disabuse Evola of all these pagan errors. And it's unfortunate because if Evola had been Orthodox, I think he could have been a modern church father. We're talking about someone who was just incredibly brilliant, but unfortunately was spiritually very deranged. And so I'm hoping to baptize Julius Evola with Fascism Viewed from the Cross, which is a play on Fascism Viewed from the Right, Evola's book. And also the cover design here, if you've read any of the Arctos publishing books that publish Evola's books in translated English, very inspired by the Arctos covers. So I'm hoping that this will baptize Julius Evola. Frankie says, thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate your grace with this topic. I kept wondering to myself, well, wouldn't someone who is one of the worst humans for being a National Socialist be the most in need of Christ? I think all the worst people are in need of Christ, regardless of what they believe. So yes, I would say that, and everyone else. I mean, the kind of people that have become saints throughout church history were really bad people, right? Not in their nature, of course, but through their behavior, their expression of their passions, their slavery to their desires. St. Augustine of Hippo, St. Moses the Black, St. Mary of Egypt. I mean, there's just 2,000 years of history on this topic. St. Cyprian. And I had a very prolifically dark and evil past before I don't know whether it's proper to say I found Christ, Christ found me, some combination of the two. I can see in retrospect how he was pursuing me even when I was living in my filth. And it took me a couple of years to kind of wise up to what was going on. And that's a process that continues to this day. But speaking of your comment, Frankie, I think that I'm going to be criticized by many different groups of people for this book. I'm sure Fordham is already going into absolute conniptions over this. Tuesday when this book debuted, actually it takes a day to update sales ranks after the first day it comes out. But as of earlier today and yesterday, this book was the #1 book in 4 out of the 6 categories that I had it listed for. Because Amazon lets you put 3 categories for each format, 3 for paperback, 3 for Kindle. So it was #1 in race relations, general sociology of race relations, Christian social studies, all the kind of topics that Fordham probably considers themselves the authorities on. This book is now outranking anything these people have written. I don't think they're going to like that very much. I know I'm already on their radar. I've already been on at least one slideshow that they've made of me holding up a book, a Franco biography, Francisco Franco. So I think I'm going to be criticized by the liberal, pseudo-Orthodox crowd. Thank you for the super chat, Tilo Bound. He says, congrats on the new release. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. I think I'm also going to be criticized, and this has already started to happen a little bit behind the scenes, not so much with the book itself as with the ideas in the book. There are also people on the right, who describe themselves on the right, who will criticize me from that direction. I think the true royal path means both the left and the right are angered by you, and they both think you're terrible. I think that's the royal path, is when the extremists on both sides agree that you're a terrible person. Then you know you're going the right way, right? And I think people who are very far in that direction will criticize me as well. I know a lot of people. Let me back up, because this answer will help answer this. It's very hard to find books on fascists that are in any way, shape, or form balanced. By that I mean that men like Mussolini, Hitler, and Codrianu, who are the fascists that I study in this book, that I write about in this book, the books written about them either paint them as the physical incarnations of the principle of evil, or flawless heroes saving their countries from Judeo-Masonry. There's very, very little in between. There's very little objective analysis. And part of that is because I don't think there's a standard to compare them to, frankly, until this book. And I'm not saying that out of pride. I'm saying I wrote this intentionally and for a reason, looking at the world of orthodoxy, of literature, of nationalist ideas, and thinking there's something badly missing from this. There is something not being done here that needs to be done. There has to be an objective standard to compare all of this to for Orthodox Christians to know what we believe, what we don't believe, and who and what movements align or not with that in various ways, shapes, and forms. Thank you, Frankie, for another super chat. Man, you are funding this stream today, Frankie. I appreciate you. He says, well, I've heard some say there is no place for right-wing extremism in the church, which is true, but if they are lost, do they not need to be reached? Yes, everybody needs to be reached. I think it was Father Barnabas Powell who said on Twitter, this was probably 4 or 5 months ago, he said, I'm glad there are so many racists coming to the church, and I hope more of them come here. Right? Because people are complaining, oh, the Orthodox Church is full of racists. And he said, good. People should come here and be healed. Right? Now, of course, there's a difference between actual racism and what the spirit of the world refers to as racism. But his point stands, and you guys get what I'm saying, right? I should probably turn my light on. Huh? Hold on a second. It's getting dark in here. All right, there we go. So I think you guys get what his point was, that if we are going to say we need to reject people from the Orthodox Church because of their beliefs or whatever, we are depriving them of the chance to be healed. And Christ came for hurt people, right? He said, I came not to save the righteous, not to call the righteous rather, but to save sinners, to call sinners to repentance. I know I'm butchering it. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm not as much of a Bible scholar as I should be. I came not to save, I came not for the righteous, but to call sinners to repentance, something like that. St. Ignatius Brianchaninov has an unbelievably powerful chapter in a book called The Field, a chapter called The Pharisee, where he points out, think about this thing Christ said, if he came not for the righteous, but to save sinners, call sinners to repentance. If you think of yourself as righteous, then Christ isn't for you. He didn't come for you. He's going to pass you by if you think you're righteous, because he said he didn't come for you. He came for sinners, people that know they're sick, people that know they need healing. So if we turn people that need healing away from the church, we are depriving heaven of saints. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to show up to the pearly gates someday, go through the toll houses and hear, well, you know, you did a lot of good things, except you pushed a bunch of people out of the church who needed it most. You want to hear those words? Because I sure don't. So I'm really glad to hear, Frankie, that you kind of understand where I'm coming from. People need to be treated with grace, you know. Of course, there are limits to what sorts of things people can do and say and still be considered in good standing in the church, still commune in the church, right? St. Paul is very clear that certain types of, I believe it was sexual sins, people that are living in unrepentant sexual sin should basically just be thrown out until they're repenting and trying to be healed. Right? If there's someone at the church that's just living in filth and spreading their poison to other people, well, there's probably not a good reason for that person to be allowed to be there in their current state. But that if the person's doing the same behavior except knows that they need healing and is confessing it and coming to receive communion and healing, well, now we have to tolerate the person's weaknesses, right? Tolerate their weaknesses and show them the way to be healed, which is what we all need. That's why we're in church. We're there to be healed, right? People come for different reasons, but ultimately that's it, right? And you can make the argument of whatever gets you into the church is a good thing. And I think there's something to that. Like, okay, maybe all the left-wing politics drives you to orthodoxy because it's not left-wing. Great. Now you're in the door, and now it's time to be healed. Maybe the things you need to be healed from have nothing to do with why you thought you were here. How many of us didn't even have any idea how sick we were, how spiritually sick we were, until we started living an Orthodox life to some extent, right? I was going to say the best of our ability, but I'd be lying because I don't think any of us is actually trying our best the way we maybe sometimes tell ourselves we are. But at least making some effort. And the closer we get to God, the closer we get to the light, the more of our darkness we see. We go, wow, I'm actually a really terrible, awful person. I didn't know that. I thought I was here for a different reason. I thought I was here because I got tired of my Protestant worship band at the last place I went and wanted something more traditional. Oh, but it actually turns out I'm a terrible person and I need to be healed from the inside out, right? How many people have had that experience? That's what Orthodoxy is. You don't know why you're there, but God knows why you're there, and you'll find out eventually. People are really digging these classes here. Thank you all for being here. There have been so many comments and questions that I have not seen because the chat box just keeps going while I'm talking. So I'm going to take a break for a second and kind of look through some things and respond to things. So Nate says, this is an interesting comment. I think it's important to note nationalism and fascism are not one and the same. So in my book, let's see, what page does fascism start on? 129? Yeah. So my fascism section begins with this quote from Father Dumitru Stăniloae. Is that how you pronounce it? Sorry, Romanians, it's probably not how you pronounce it. He says, all nationalism is either redemptive or destructive, according to whether or not it is animated by Christian faith. It's also the one quote in this book with no footnote because I couldn't find the original source for it. I found a lot of other people talking about that quote, but I couldn't find his work where he says that. So if you guys know where that quote's from, please let me know. I've got people sending me, hey, there's a typo on this page. There's a typo on this page. I like this stuff. I like when you guys find things and send it to me so that I can make the book better. So if you know where that Father Dumitru Stăniloae quote is from, please do let me know, because that is a very important point. So many comments. We got almost 70 people here. Thank you, guys. It has been a really long time since we did this. Live streams kind of terrify me these days because my previous youthful boldness often led me to jokes and comments and attitudes that I don't think were as dispassionate as I should be. And live streams can kind of bring that up. They can kind of bring your pride and ego up more than a scripted video. So I'm trying to be well behaved today. Let's see. Congratulations on the book. Thank you, sir. Interested in the content of the book, what standpoint it has. So the table of contents I posted to my Telegram and my Twitter, both of which are called Brother Augustine. Marcus Williams says, why fascism? Doesn't Orthodoxy come into conflict more with communism? That's not really the premise of the book, is what is Orthodoxy most in conflict with. It's just a historical survey of 20th century nationalist movements from an Orthodox perspective, specifically anti-communist nationalist movements. I would be surprised if there were not many Orthodox books about communism already, given how many Orthodox Christians suffered under it. When is it available to buy? As of Tuesday. It is on Amazon right now. So far, so the sales rankings, like I mentioned, have been really phenomenal, thank God. It was number one in 4 of the 6 categories as of yesterday. But the reviews have not come in yet because obviously people take more than a day or two to read a 340-page book. So all I know so far in terms of feedback from you guys, my intended audience, is that you guys like the idea. You like the idea enough to want to read the book. But I don't know yet if people like it. So my joy at seeing, being number one new release in Christian Orthodoxy, number one race relations, number one religious essays, that's cool. That's great. But I don't have feedback yet, except from my editor, reader Stephen Crawford, whose channel Theopolitics I will be on this Saturday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'll be going over on his channel to talk more about it for my first interview on the book. He told me he really liked it. Thank God. I really hope everyone else likes it too. If you bought a copy and read it, if you liked it or learned something from it, please do leave a review. That's not only good feedback for me, but if you think it's useful information, that also helps convince other people to have a look at it too. So I really appreciate when people do things like that. Is Cadrianu and the Iron Guard discussed? Yes. The book is actually #1 in Romanian history today on the Amazon platform, because I kind of put the 3 movements covered here. So Mussolini and fascism, Iron Cross for National Socialism, because the guy who made this cover, Censored Anon on Telegram, told me I wanted a swastika here at first. He told me if you put a swastika on the cover, the book is much less likely to get published by Amazon. So we went with an Iron Cross, and then of course you have the Iron Guard logo, or fashtag, as I sometimes call it. This logo they came up with while behind bars in Vacaresti prison. So there's an entire section dedicated to Cadrianu and the Iron Guard, or the Legion, if you prefer. Technically, I think the Iron Guard was the more militant wing of the Legion, but most people use them interchangeably. Will there be an audiobook? Probably not. It is an enormous effort to make an audiobook. I know a lot of people like them. A lot of people listened to my last bestseller on the Masons and Their Lies via audio, but that was also like half the length of this, less than half the length of this book. And it just, I recorded that at work because I was a security guard at the time, by myself 8 hours a day. So I could just bring my laptop, record the audio tracks at work, upload them. I don't have anywhere near that much time anymore. I still have a full-time job, except now my job requires me to be working the whole time. So I can't actually do things like that the way that I used to. Maybe someday, if someone wants to volunteer for it, I'll split revenue from the audiobook with that person. But don't agree too quickly to that, because if you haven't done it before, it really is a massive undertaking. And then Amazon can be extremely picky with what files have in them. Like, you need a certain amount, like half a second of silence before and after each track. It's a whole complicated thing. But if anyone wants to do that, I'm sorry, I can't pay you ahead of time right now. But I will, if someone wants to volunteer to do the audiobook, the tracks, I'll split audio revenue with you 50-50 each month, if you want to do that. But don't agree until you know you have the time to do it, because like I said, it's a massive undertaking. Let's see what else we got here. This is another good point. Atticus says, everyone criticizes communism already. A critique of fascism is necessary. From a specifically Orthodox point of view, besides Ivan Ilin's essay on fascism, which is included in this book, I don't really know of any other effort to do it. And it's a very short essay. It's just kind of a summary, a very brief summary. I don't think anyone's done this in depth before. Excuse me. If they have, I'm not aware of it, and it's not in English, because I'm sure I would have found it, right? I think I would have found it, excuse me, during my research for the book. Yes, I took the title from Evola's book, Fascism Viewed from the Right. In fact, one of the typos is that at one point in my book, I refer to my book as Fascism Viewed from the Right. I missed it every time I proofread the book, but a reader let me know. So sometime soon, when I hear some other typos come in from readers giving me feedback, I will fix that in future printings of it. How might we step away from this book and view our Catholic cousins like EMJ and NJF? Who is NJF? Oh, wait, no. Talking about Nick Fuentes, is that NJF? So because this book is an Orthodox book, I ran into the dilemma of, how do I compare Mussolini and Hitler to Orthodoxy, given their extremely minimal to non-existent interaction with it? More for Mussolini, who I'm not sure he ever even heard of Orthodoxy. So a lot of this book, for Mussolini and Hitler specifically, goes through the concordats, or the agreements, that their political governments, their political parties made with the Vatican. because that we can still look at from an Orthodox perspective once we see what they are saying to each other. I'm not sure the Catholic and Orthodox perspective are that different in certain regards. We certainly agree with a lot of the moral teaching, if not all of it, depending on which Catholic you ask and which Orthodox you ask. So there is a lot of material related to Catholicism in those chapters, but even that we look at through an Orthodox lens. How might you step away from it and view other Catholic or Catholic people? I mean, that's entirely up to you. I have a lot of respect for E. Michael Jones. I've had him on my channel, still my most viewed interview to this day. I gave a speech next to him at the first Trad Forum conference. I've got 2 of his books, though I've reached the point where I kind of just want to read Orthodox stuff, like 99% Orthodox stuff, or books related to my job. So I don't read much Catholic stuff, if any, these days. I don't follow Nick Fuentes. I don't keep up to date with what he's doing. How do I word this? I recognize the impact that he has had and is continuing to have. And I think there is some very positive things there. I've also heard him say things that I really didn't agree with, but I'm not really like a follower of people in general. I will say back in my more political days, I was at Stop the Steal rallies waving an America First flag. I was that guy shouting through my megaphone, walking up and down the sidewalk, shouting into a megaphone with the America First flag. I had those days, okay? Moving kind of past that was part of how I got to where I am. I have nothing against either of these people. I've never spoken to Nick Fuentes. I made an attempt to speak with him once, but he never saw my message. So how you view them, I have no comment on per se. I do think Nick is interesting. He's very young. Agree with some things he says, disagree with others, but I don't follow him or keep up with him. Couldn't tell you the last Nick Fuentes video I watched. Must have been years ago. So I don't actually, no, that's not true, because I watched his interviews with Kanye West when that was a thing for like, what was that, 4 days? For 4 days, that was a very exciting thing for everybody. And then that just kind of, disappeared. Let's see. Let's keep going here. Yeah, I don't have anything against someone just because they're not Orthodox, obviously. Did I quote St. John Chrysostom against the Jews? Oh, you better believe I did. So in the section where I look at the Jews from an Orthodox Christian perspective, that section in and of itself is separated into 3 smaller sections. The first one is called Biblical and Patristic Rhetoric, where I talk about against the Jews, not just from St. John Chrysostom, but that whole genre of Adversus Judaeus. He was far from the only father that contributed to that genre. The second section is church canons, where I go through the rudder, the entire rudder, talking about all the canons related to Jews and Judaism. I didn't list them all because some of them are very redundant, or it's just the same thing from a different council. And then the third one is Imperial Laws, which again was once published as a Gab article called Royal Saints and Roman Jews. But yes, John Chrysostom is absolutely discussed in the book with some perspective that I think some people might not realize. I don't want to give too much away. People might not understand what they're reading per se. And they also don't read those homilies, which I've read cover to cover. There's things they miss in there that might surprise them. I knew someone was going to ask this question. Trying to be careful with the question to this. I appreciate that. Do you address the claimed numbers that we're told about today? Some viewers will understand what that question means, and the answer is that I do not. Not in the book. There's 2 reasons I don't address that. And I'm sure people will criticize me for not addressing it, but I want to explain. The first reason I don't is because if I did include that, I think it would become the focus of the book to a degree that would really detract from the overall message and purpose of the book. That section would become the most debated, the most talked about, and that's really not what I wanted. The second reason I don't is because I myself don't know the answer. This is something I've spent a good amount of time on. I'm still trying to understand it. And so I don't want to write about something that I'm not reasonably confident I'm portraying accurately. So let those with ears to hear. Rat Splatigan says, the book is #1 in Romania history on Amazon and #2 in Christian social studies. You'll love to see it. Thank you to everybody who's picked up a copy. I really appreciate it. And I think that I genuinely think that your investment will be paid back many times in terms of what you're going to learn. If this book had been available 5 years ago, it would have saved me a lot of heartache and wrong directions. And that's part of why I wrote it. I want to save other people all that labyrinth that I went through, right? Same reason I wrote the Mason book, to spare other people the heartache that I had to suffer just to learn these lessons. So I think my life is a cautionary tale. Saint of the Prisons is a phenomenal book, yes. I did not talk about Dollfuss and Austrian clerico-fascism at all. My thoughts on this trending Second Enlightenment rhetoric. I don't know what that is. James Lindsay, for example, it smells of Jordan Peterson. I don't really pay attention to what's happening in the world. I try to live under a rock as much as possible for the most part. I've listened to a lot of James Lindsay's videos last year specifically. I prefer Eric Voegelin's book, Science, Politics, and Gnosticism. I think pretty much everything Lindsay is saying, Voegelin already covered, but in a more clear and a more Christian way. So I have nothing against James Lindsay. I've never talked to the guy. It just, if someone's not truly seeking Christ, even if they have really piercing insight in certain things, why not just get that same information from somebody who actually agrees with your beliefs? I don't know. I don't think Lindsay's a Christian. I don't know. Maybe someone who here, if anyone knows, you can let me know. So people ask me about Franco a lot. So I mentioned earlier, this book has gone through many different versions. In the earlier versions of this book, it included outlines for chapters on Franco, on Salazar, on Primo de Rivera. Eventually, I reached a point where I felt like I was writing the same chapter over and over again. And so I already had a Catholic, nominal or otherwise, in Mussolini, right? Nominal or otherwise in Hitler. You have to read the book to see what I think I found on all those topics. But I didn't want it to be a redundant book. I didn't want you guys to feel like I already read this chapter with a different name. I think Franco, I know my answer to that. I read a fantastic book as part of my research for the Franco chapter called Mine Were of Trouble by a man named Peter Kemp, who has a really interesting story, was a super elite soldier, and also just a phenomenal writer. I mean, one of the only journalists I've ever respected, Peter Kemp. If you haven't read Mine Were of Trouble, it's the story of this British journalist who basically goes to Spain to fight for Franco and the nationalist forces. It's one of the only, if not the only, tellings of that war in English that's not from a communist point of view. It's a really, really interesting book. If you're interested in Franco, I can't recommend that enough. Mine Were of Trouble by Peter Kemp. I know he wrote 2 more books about other skirmishes and battles and military type things. I haven't read them though. I ended up taking the Franco chapter out. I may or may not include it in a future edition. I don't know if I'm going to do a future edition. I tell myself I am. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. This just came out 2 days ago, so we'll see. We'll see. Ivan Ilyin is mentioned in the book, yes. The Black Hundreds are not mentioned, but I do know St. John of Kronstadt belonged to it. I didn't include much Russian stuff in here. I know there are different kinds of Russian fascism. They're not included in the book. Again, don't hold me to it, but maybe in a future edition, that could be a really interesting way to expand the material. And keep in mind that this is just like my current level of knowledge too. So there are certain arguments I make based on how certain Byzantine emperors, like royal saints, led things. But there is some limit to it because, for example, The royal saints whose laws I go over, it's the Orthodox saints from Constantine to Justinian. And that standard, it's built on that standard. Well, there were a lot of saints and emperors after them too, right? There was Russian Tsars that were saints. There were Siberian leaders that were saints, Romanian leaders that were saints. All of that is not covered in the book. And at some point, if I read those things, it might change my opinion. But I set this up to be concise and to communicate what I'm trying to communicate in the most effective way possible without bogging the reader down. I mean, I could have made this a 2,000-page book. At some point as an author, you have to go, I think this is what I want to say. Or you just keep writing until it's 2,000 pages, right? That's also an option. But I'm not that guy. I don't think a 2,000-page book, I don't think people are going to remember all that. I don't think all the details are necessarily. Yeah, that works. To communicate what I'm hoping to communicate. But yes, it could have been a much longer book. If I wanted to talk about Black Hundreds and Franco and Mosley and whatever the case may be. One of the authors in the book, Athonite Fathers of the 20th Century, was a former occultist. I have that book. I don't remember coming across that chapter, though. Now, there's an interesting question. How do I deal with knowing knowledge I otherwise shouldn't know? Man, what a question. How do I deal with knowing knowledge? I'm just one of these people, and I always have been this way. Anything I'm interested in, I pursue and I learn about. And other people's opinions of that has never stopped me from doing it. Sometimes it should have stopped me from doing it. I could have saved myself a lot of trouble and darkness had I listened to other people in my youth. But I don't know, how do I deal with it? We have to make every thought captive to Christ to the best of our ability and repent tearfully when we fail. That's the best answer I have for you. Yeah, see, Orthodox Boomer Grandma said pretty much the same thing I just said. Did Hitler really protect Mount Athos? I didn't go into this in the book. However, there's an interview with Father Maximus Costas you can find on YouTube about this topic. Yes, he did protect Mount Athos. And Father Maximus says it's because he wanted its treasures for himself and didn't really want anyone else to ransack it first. I'm paraphrasing. But there was certainly a period of time where at least one monastery had a portrait of Hitler inside because he protected it from other soldiers that would have wanted to destroy it. I haven't read very deeply on that topic. I remember, if I remember right, he was trying to protect it from Bulgarian soldiers. But I've also had people tell me that wasn't the case. But in either case, when people hear Hitler, the protector of Mount Athos, you shouldn't think of that as if he was just really in awe of Orthodoxy and saw it as an important religious relic, because that's not the case as far as I know, and according to Father Maximus. Now Peter is saying the Germans tried to bomb Athos at one point. Oh, hey, Peter, how are you? Good to see you here. Tried to bomb Athos at one point, but bomb chutes wouldn't open. So other people know more about this Hitler and Athos thing than I do. But if that's true, you have your answer. The protection didn't last long. Being based is not a sin, someone says. What about those who have not yet been baptized but are cohabiting or some other sin, maybe even being of the Skittles? You can just say gay on this channel. You can say LGBT. You can say transgender, whatever. I don't need to hide what I'm saying with cute little phrases. I mean, this channel makes like $12 a month, so I don't care if it gets demonetized at all. I don't even put ads in most of my videos because I find ads annoying. Like, if I find them annoying when I watch it, I don't really want to force other people to do that either. What exactly are you asking, Frankie? because this was from 23 minutes ago. I don't know what tirade I was in the middle of when you asked this question. Can you clarify what you meant by that? These glasses got me going. Brother Augustine with hair. Yeah. Mike Dixie Dago. I thought that might be you. Glasses remind me. Oh, that's not wholesome. Look, they're just clip-ons, okay? They're blue blockers. Protect my eyes from these dangerous screen waves before bed. It can mess with your sleep. Someone says National Socialism is Christianity in practice. You might want to read what Bormann said, Hitler's personal secretary, said about National Socialism and Christianity before you go around saying things like that. But see, I told you guys earlier I was going to get criticism like this from a certain type of person, right? How did I overcome the darkness after I converted? Man, one day at a time. And even 5 years into Orthodoxy, the black is never far. Trust me. When you say overcome the darkness, I mean, we're talking about layers of passions and sins that on the surface are one thing, but even if you overcome certain behaviors, it doesn't mean the roots of those things are out of your heart, mind, and soul. I mean, we're talking about a lifetime of healing that Orthodoxy, that we need from Orthodoxy. We don't do this Protestant thing where I'm saved now and everything's great. I mean, okay, good. I'm glad you had an experience of grace and you believe in Jesus now. You want to be healed, but you have such a long way to go if you're like me and lived my past. I mean, I wasn't just an occultist. I was a very dedicated pickup artist for 8 or 9 years. Okay. I spent my life destroying my soul and the souls of other people. And it just takes prayer, sacraments, confession, a lot of confession, one day at a time. You have to struggle. You have to fight for it. Paul says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's how. How you overcome the darkness is slowly, very, very slowly, very painfully, with fear and with trembling. See, this guy got it. This guy understands their blue light blockers. Oh, cool. All Heart knows this Theopolitics channel that I'm going on Saturday. Metropolitan. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I should have put that in the book. Peter, where were you when I was doing my research? Metropolitan Seraphim of Piraeus called Hitler an agent of international Zionism on Greek TV years ago. That's interesting. What was his rationale for that? Was it because he wanted to deport Jews and in that way sort of indirectly led to the creation of Israel? Is that what you're saying? Because I could see that angle. Maybe an unwitting agent, perhaps? Or are you saying he was a witting agent? Yeah, De Grelle and the Rexists, that was another chapter that was in an earlier outline of the book. But again, I felt like I was writing the same chapter over and over at a certain point. Does the book look at the state of fascism from the point of the church? I'm not sure what you mean by the state of fascism, but yeah, that's the whole point of the book. It's fascism viewed from the cross. Yeah, see, Nate got that. Gonna ask. Oh, nice. So he's talking about the audiobook thing. Gonna ask Reagan. Reagan is a good friend of mine. I've known Reagan for years. He was the first interview on my channel, actually. Still waiting for him to finish his graphic novel because I'm definitely going to buy it, have him on to talk about it. I know he's taking his time to make it perfect, though. Mom Silo says, I got your book and disagree with a lot of it. Would you be okay with me doing an in-depth critique? Yes, please. Can't find a way to DM contact you anywhere else, so asking here. Of course. I'm very aware this book is going to cause people to have different opinions. Excuse me. I am curious to hear what different sides are going to say. I suspect I know, but I've been wrong many times about many things, and I'm sure continue to be wrong about many things. Yeah, if you do like a video critique or something, send it my way, post it. Oh, you just said you can't DM it. Just email me, brotheraugustine1@gmail.com, the number 1, and I'll watch it. Maybe I'll learn from it. Maybe I'll be like, no, I disagree with you. But sure, yeah, you're welcome to send it to me, and that sounds cool. You'd like to see me in an interview with Adam Green from No More News. If he decides to do this, Michael should be aware Adam is openly an anti-Christian, anti-Semite. I spoke with Adam Green briefly in public once upon a time on the Kill stream. Michael Sisko messaged me saying, hey, Adam Green is on the Kill stream talking about XYZ. You should call in. I said, okay. I don't have any idea if the clip is available to see anywhere. I spoke with him very briefly, and I'm trying hard not to speak ill of other people because it's something that I do way too often and is a sin. I was not impressed. I'll put it that way. I did not get the impression that he was acting in good faith during our brief conversation. It seemed like he was trying to do all these gotchas and not actually listening to the conversation, didn't have any real answers for what I was saying, not listening to my answers. So it just came across as kind of dishonest. And so for that reason, I don't see what the point would be talking to him any further. He blocked me on Twitter a long time ago too, but I made the effort to talk to him. I spoke to him the same way I speak to everyone. I try to be respectful and conversational, and I didn't feel that was reciprocated. Overall, what made you feel this book was necessary? The short answer is because it doesn't exist yet. And I think it'll help a lot of people who are trying to navigate their way through exactly the issues that I hope and pray I put together concisely in this book here. Thank you guys for all the comments. We got 70 people, so much participation. For my first live stream back in a long time. It might be the only one, just to warn you guys, because like I said, I am kind of afraid of doing these now. But this is a really nice reintroduction back to audience participation, and I'm grateful that you guys are all here and behaving. Have I watched the video by the person who was in the show X Factor? Yeah, I responded to it. I have a video called Saving Goku and Response to Altion Childs somewhere in my video list on my channel here. James Lindsay, not a Christian. Okay. My thoughts on Uncle Ted. I haven't read any of his works, but I'm told from people that have that he had some very good insight into the dangers of technology, but ultimately lacked the logos of Christ. And so for that reason, I'm not super interested in reading it. All Heart says, James Lindsay, the garden variety lib who hates the right more than he hates the left and says as much. Sadly, he got into a big spat with Paul Gottfried. I reached out, not privately, but on one of James Lindsay's Gab posts. I tried to ask him a clarifying question about something he said in a video I didn't understand. And he never got back to me, and it looks like he doesn't really respond to questions in general. So I just stopped caring for that and the fact that he didn't seem to be a Christian. I did find his videos interesting when I was listening to him, learning about the different founders of Marxist currents and whatnot. But you just kind of get it after a while that it's a bad thing to be avoided. And I'm one of these people where once I understand something is bad, I don't need to keep hearing about why it's bad. Does that make sense? To me, it's like touching a stove. It burns your hand, and then you keep touching it just to remind yourself that it's hot and shouldn't be touched. What's the point of that? It's hot. Stop. Just don't touch it. Move on. Go to a different room of your house, right? Oh, he's an avowed atheist. I see. Am I drinking out of a jar? I am. I am drinking out of a jar. We have these instead of like plastic cups in my house, these mason jars. Or the mason jars, the rectangle ones, I don't know. Now someone's going to clip that, see, and say, see, it's a psyop. He's not an ex-mason. He drinks mason jars. He's signaling, guys. He's signaling his handlers. You guys think I'm joking, but I hear some interesting things on the internet. What do I think about the Sabbatean Frankists? I don't think highly of them. Sabbatai Zevi convinced, what was it, like 2/3 of Jews in Europe that he was the Messiah, and then converted to Islam. Whoops. Yeah, once you go 1,000-page book, it's hard to retain information. I mean, when you read a book, there's certain things that stick with you, right? And there's a way of just communicating so much information that you just get lost in the weeds. And I try to avoid that because I don't typically prefer books that way. And I think most people would rather have something easily readable. So I just write my books to be easily readable to the best of my ability. Oh, Elder Theodosius of St. Paul's, the one who was an occultist, page 166, spiritualist. Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, I see, Frankie. Man, I'm getting to this like 20 minutes later. Talking about those who tolerate a repentant going to communion confession. How can be tolerated before that point? I get what you're saying. Man, that question might be above my pay grade. Really good question. Really good question. I would say if they're there to learn and grow and not try to convince people in church of their lifestyle, then it would be okay. But obviously, if they were there to argue, then I wouldn't see a reason to tolerate their presence. But I'm also not clergy, so I don't have to worry about kicking people out of church. No, I'm not Rushby. Is he here? Probably not. I don't think he's here. I haven't seen his name if he's here. I don't think he spends much time on YouTube these days. So many comments. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying to keep up with them. I really like Evola a lot. Glad to see his ideas filtered through Orthodoxy. God willing, this will serve its purpose. What do I think of the book Surprised by Christ? Actually, that was the first Orthodox book I read. My baptismal priest gave it to me a long time ago. I thought it was really interesting that Father James was one of the founders of Jews for Jesus and then became Orthodox. It's been so long, I don't remember much beyond that. Forgive me. But I remember liking it at the time. Young Penitent, guys, he's here in the chat. You see him. I'm going to be on his show. We haven't scheduled it yet, have we? I've got 4 interviews on my whiteboard here. Yours does not have a date and time yet. I believe I thought I got back to you. I'm sorry. Forgive me for that. I would have seen that shortly either way because there's nothing on the whiteboard here. I will reach out to you after this stream, Young Penitent, to schedule a talk on your show, hopefully in the next few weeks. Now I got to check the forum and see if I got back to you because I'm going to feel bad if I didn't. Forgive me. Like I said, I worked no, I didn't work a full day. I worked 8 hours today. That's not a full day. I don't have the excuse. A 10-hour day is a full day for me. Oh, I did get back to you. Aha. I asked if next Saturday would work for you. See, I might be terrible, but sometimes I do things that aren't. I guess I got lost in the mix. I got a lot of people asking me about interviews. Again, forgive me. Saving Goku. It's a classic Brother Augustine stream. Yeah. That was a fun one. I actually just found in my closet today that blue velvet blazer that I was wearing in that video. I still remember it. It was the only video I ever had. I was wearing that blazer. Goku 100%. You guys are going to have to watch the video to know what we're talking about here. Uncle Ted viewed from the cross. Yeah, probably not going to be my next one. Am I still doing HVAC? Yes, that's why the day is a full day is 10 hours. Do I still hold EMJ in high regard, despite the fact that he makes obviously false claims? I mean, I respect him for his courage, certainly. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. A lot of people make false claims. I mean, if our standard is someone must say 100% correct things 100% of the time, or we can't be their friend, I'm not sure. Frankie, another super chat. Thank you, sir. How much can fascism be separated from the racial aspect of the movement? That seems to be the premier focus of the public education system. So, interestingly enough, one of Evola's criticisms of Adolf Hitler, of which he had many, was that because of Hitler, everyone now associates fascism with racism. Racism in a biological sense, not like preferring to be around your own people or anything like that. Racism being like, let me back up. Evola describes the presupposition of racism, the racist worldview, as a essentially failure to recognize that the soul and the body are not the same. I worded it way more poorly than Evola did. I have the actual saying in my book. This indissoluble unity of soul and body is the presupposition of the racist worldview, meaning that someone's value basically can be discerned. The value of their soul can be discerned from what type of body they have, right? And he blamed Hitler for the reason that that's still what's taught in public school today. If you read through the book, you'll see that different people had different views of race and its relation to nationalism and fascism. Mussolini really didn't seem to care at all until 1938. There were kind of stirrings of it before then, but especially with Italy's conquest of Ethiopia, you had soldiers, I mean, just to be blunt, sleeping with Ethiopian women, giving birth to half white, half black children. So then they started thinking, wait a second, we got to make some kind of statement about this sort of thing. But really until that, and then until the Aryan Manifesto, or the Manifesto of Race in 1938, he didn't really talk about it. Didn't seem to really care beyond vague affirmations of the strength of the Italian race. But he never before 38 seemed to really have any sort of disdain for other races. And then, of course, we have to ask the question, well, Hitler had obviously a big influence on Mussolini at that point. So how much of what happened in Italy post-1938 was really just Nazism taking place in Italy? That's why Evola doesn't even consider the Solid Republic to be real fascism, when Mussolini was basically just a Nazi puppet at that point. Orthodox Boomer Grandma, thank you for the super chat. Will I ever introduce you to our bride? No. It's been a long day. Let me try rereading that. I'm just going to read what she said. Will you, that's me, ever introduce us, that's you, to your bride, that's my wife, on here, that's my stream. We, that's you, would love to meet her, my wife. Probably not. I don't really need my family being public. People who have been to conferences have met my wife. She was my girlfriend at Trad Forum, so everyone there met her. At Second Montanica, she was there. Everyone met her there. But no, I don't foresee that being a thing. We live a pretty small, quiet life, and I take enough flack from the world being one public figure. I don't think we need two. Yeah, exactly. We got him. Mason jars exposed. Brother Augustine exposed yet again. I feel like I get exposed every few weeks for something or other, right? So why not? It's enough time has passed. I think I should be exposed again for sure. Do I feel a conversation between those who've left Masonry for Orthodox would be fruitful? Yeah, probably. I mean, I wrote my book for priests and also to help Masons struggling with grappling with being a Christian and a Freemason, which a lot of them are, to help them get out of the lodge. And I think that knowing other people have left and become Orthodox can really be helpful to them in making that decision. So yeah, I think there's value to that. Oh, young penitent just saw my message. Okay, now we're on the same page. So my interview schedule for now is I'm going on the Theopolitics channel on this Saturday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. I will be on Mr. Patriarch's channel Sunday, June 26th at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. Repeal the 20th Century Friday, June 23rd at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. And then I'm working this out with Young Penitent. We're going to get something scheduled for you guys as well. Have I read or listened to Paul Kingsnorth? No, I do not know who that is. Who is that? All right, folks. It's been an hour and 18 minutes. We had 71, I think, people at the peak of the stream. Thank you so much for participating, everyone. Thank you for the questions. I hope I was able to answer them effectively. Thank you to everyone who has picked up Fascism Viewed from the Cross. I look forward to hearing everybody's feedback. What you think of it, what you agree with, what you disagree with. I just gave you guys that list of interviews that I'll be on soon. Probably more content information will come out on those because people will ask me questions that you guys didn't. So I'll be able to go on new tirades, as it were, about the book and the ideas behind it. Thank you all for the super chats. That's really generous of you. The way our economy is going, I know that that is a serious sacrifice. Oh, we got one more. We got one more. I got to answer this one before we say goodnight. Frankie D, does the book discuss the Orthodox approach to a nation as far as maintaining, as they say, a certain percentage of the legacy population? Not in terms of percentages. However, all of the relevant sections, or the ones I thought were relevant, from a Russian document called The Basis of the Social Concept as regards ethnic communities, defense of the nation, and things of that nature are included in the Orthodoxy and the State section of the book, which is actually one of the hardest to write. I would have thought a different one would have been harder, but Orthodoxy and the State was one of the last ones that I finished. Took a break from it to finish other chapters. So the sections about basis of the social concept, I think, discuss the Orthodox approach to a nation that you're asking about. But I have not found anything Orthodox saying we must maintain X percentage of the population as the native ethnicity or anything like that. I haven't seen that. If you've seen something like that, feel free to send it to me. I'm curious about that, if that exists. So that being said, thank you everybody once again for being here. Lots of old familiar faces, some new faces, new names. I hope you all have an amazing night. May God bless you. I hope that you are struggling well in this Apostles' Fast of ours. God bless you all, and I will see you later. All right. Have a good night, everybody.